Welcome to your Time Management Revolution. This is Time Management Fixer Helene Segura. In today's episode, I'll be sharing a previously recorded interview during which we're discussing time management and mind management. Enjoy.
It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me. You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump. So it's,
Craig Price is the man.
I knew it. Craig, shut up. It's Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, Helene Segura is here to talk about inefficiency. Welcome to the podcast. This week, in honor of my guest and for the sake of efficiency, we'll just get right to the interview about her book, The Efficiency Assassin, with Helene Segura. Being busy, and I've said this a couple times before, being busy is like the new martyrdom. Being busy is status. Being busy is people's excuse or to try to way to inflate how important they are. So are people actually taking on too much stuff and actually are being busy, or are they just not being effective in how they work and do their thing?
I think there's a difference between being busy and being purposeful. And you can have a lot to do while you're being purposeful. But when you're busy, to me, that just implies that you have a whole lot going on, but you may not know what direction you're going in. And I think there are a lot of people out there who are busy because they've piled way too much on their plates and they're not sure what to do next and which direction to go in.
Because I always hear about efficiency, and basically what I hear and what the end result ends up being is not that people are working more effectively, it's that they're streamlining and allowing themselves to take on way too much stuff. So remember we supposed to have a paperless society, and then the world was going to be so much easier, and then the robots were going to take over our jobs. But it seems like instead of working 20 hours a week, people are working 45, 50 hours a week, and they're doing 10 times as much work as they were 5 years ago in the name of efficiency.
I agree with that. I find more and more people working longer hours, and I also think that's a part of our American culture because we are known around the world for working around the clock, not taking vacations, having our devices with us 24 hours a day so we can always get the next business call in. So to me, my definition of efficiency has to do with how well and how effectively you use your time during the day so that you can have a life outside of work. So when I talk about efficiency, I'm not talking about how you can squeeze even more into your 60-hour work week. It's how can you create the work period you would like to have and have a quality life outside of it.
And my guest today is Helene Segura. She's written a great new book called The Inefficiency Assassin, Time Management Tactics for Working Smarter, Not Longer. And, I hear a lot of people out there, they've got a lot of time-saving books, a lot of productivity books. They're huge, massive tomes that it's like, I don't have time to read this. So how is another efficiency book in the marketplace going to help, and how is this one specifically going to help, especially if you don't have time to read?
Right, exactly. My friends and colleagues, when they found out I was writing this book, they said the exact same thing. They said, we don't have time for this. If we did, then we wouldn't have to read the book. So give me toilet reading, meaning you can sit down and give me toilet reading. So, we can sit down and we can read a chapter in maybe 10 minutes because that's all we have a break for in the day. And so that's how the book is designed. And there are different modules. So you can read it in order if you want, or you can flip to the module that contains the solution you need for the situation you have that's going on. And it's designed for multiple brain types. With a lot of the productivity books out there, they're designed for the left brain analytical person who's just about organized. They just need a few tips. And for the rest of the world, they get completely lost in that type of book. So my book is designed for not just the left brain, but also the right brain, the creative types, all of those folks who don't want to be so rigid during the day that they have to do the same thing each day, every single minute.
So let's get right to the part of the problem. what's the most common cause of being ineffective? Is it just disorganization, or is there something that isn't as obvious?
To me, it goes back to not having a clear definition of what your priorities are. Now, if somebody was to walk up to you and ask, what are your life's priorities? You would most likely be able to answer on the spot. But most of the time when we're at our desks and we have to decide which next move to make, we don't have a clear vision of what our life priorities and work priorities are. So we tend to just do whatever has landed in our lap, even though that may not support our priorities. So I think what it boils down to is that we don't have a clear vision of our priorities and what our high-value tasks are, and that's why we feel like we're spinning our wheels and have so much going on.
Well, if people aren't figuring out what their high-value targets are in the first place, how can they prioritize them correctly?
Exactly, and that's the whole problem. And that's why they jump on whatever task has been thrown their way or whatever new email pops up in their inbox. They think, oh, that just came in, so I need to do that now, instead of taking a step back and asking, is this going to support my high-value tasks or priorities that I need to complete that will get me further along in my career? And if they would take the time to make that decision, they would have a much easier time with prioritizing.
Well, when you're working in an office, it's hard to just turn down something that comes in, because I understand that you don't have the luxury sometimes of going, well, this is not a high priority for my career. That doesn't matter. The boss needs it done at some point, especially like if a client calls with an emergency. So how can we prioritize yet still take care of the little annoying things that everybody still has to do?
That's where communication becomes really key, and having that kind of relationship with your boss or with your coworkers, so you can walk in and say, oh my goodness, client Moneybags just called in with this emergency, and you also have me working on this other project. They're both due at the same time. I'm not sure if I can do both of them well, so is it okay if I call in some other resources on this project? And if you have that type of relationship with your boss and with your coworkers, then you will be able to handle any kind of emergency that comes up, and you will be able to make time for it and work with them to scoot those other priorities around and still get everything done, just maybe not in the order you had originally planned.
Yeah, I like to tell people to turn the tables on the person asking and say, well, I have these two things. What do you think is the higher priority? And even if it's not what you think it is, if you don't do what the boss says, sometimes you're going to get in trouble. So so if they say this is a priority, it's about letting them know what you're working on, because oftentimes, especially if you're managing 30, 40 people, you don't know what every single person's working on. And a little reminder with some information allows them to make a more accurate decision.
And that's absolutely right. And that goes back to communication being key, because so many times we operate in these funnels and we don't know what coworkers or team members or bosses or subordinates are doing. So that communication piece needs to happen.
I noticed that when communication breaks down a lot, it's almost always with when you set up a time to meet with somebody or to interact with somebody, and they're like, oh, I'm super busy. I'm sorry I'm late. Being late is part of this inefficiency. Mm-hmm. Well, to me, it just shows it's just evidence that they value their time more than yours. So how can you set that up? Because I don't really find as an adult human being late should ever be an issue, but it seems to be one of the huge things that's constantly happening with folks, is that, especially with all this technology, you think you'd have reminders all the time. How can you make sure that if you are a tendency to always be late, like, I don't know, we'll say my wife, we can set that up without having to lie to my wife about what time things start?
Well, one of the things you can do is ask your wife, hey, I've noticed that we have not arrived to some events on time, and I would really love to be there on time. So what can I do to help you make it out the door on time? And it could be that she is procrastinating and waiting until the last minute, so maybe you could help her out with some reminders ahead of time, because where we run into problems with reminders is that so many times we set a reminder for when the event is and not all the steps that need to take place to get there. So in other words, If you and your wife needed to leave the house 30 minutes ahead of time to get somewhere, then you'd need the reminder for 30 minutes ahead of time. But wait, there's more. There's a woman involved, which means the woman has to get dressed and, find the right clothes and the right shoes and the right lipstick to wear. So maybe there needs to be an additional reminder, perhaps an hour before you're supposed to leave. So helping her build in those reminders and to nudge her so that way you can get out of the door on time. I asked my husband to do that. I don't carry a phone around with me when I'm at home, so I don't have those reminders that pop up. So my husband becomes my reminder. Hey, hon, can you remind me at 2 o'clock that I need to be in the shower by then? Can you remind me by 2:30 that we're going to be out the door in 10 minutes? So we work together to make sure that we both get out the door on the same time.
Is that lack of a phone part of your efficiency? Because I'm sitting here thinking, how do you live even at home without the phone being nearby, at least to at least hear it if it's something, a reminder goes off, or it's just society that in the culture that's happened here, like you said earlier, America is this constant working, constantly plugged in society. Is that part of it? And how can you unplug like that? Because to me it sounds like you're almost Amish.
We do have a joke that we call ourselves Amish, 21st century Amish. We don't carry phones around the house. In fact, my husband does not even have a smartphone. His phone is back from, 2001. It's still a flip phone. And part of the reason why I think we feel so calm is because we aren't connected 24/7. And research shows that every time you get some kind of notification on your phone, it's like getting a hit of dopamine. So basically, we are literally addicted to checking our phones. And by removing that addiction from our lives and replacing it with different addictions, which would be cooking and drinking wine and relaxing, we find that we don't have the need to have our phones around all the time. They've become an annoyance to us. So they are a necessary evil during the work days to make sure that business gets completed, but once we're back at home, no phones.
I'm just sitting here, just agape, just mind struck by that, because it's like I totally get the dopamine thing. That makes perfect sense, because even if it's not something that you get a huge rush from, it just your brain just keeps every couple of seconds. It's like, oh, it's been 20 minutes. It's only been 3 seconds, but you check your phone again.
Right.
When you get to the office, because you were talking about we got to prioritize things. Obviously, one of the priorities is to kind of unplug away from the office. Not so easy to do in the office, but how can we keep our priorities in the forefront? Because we can make the priorities all we want, but to actually implement priorities is a little bit more of a sticky wicket.
Yes, it is. And it requires you to be totally present of what is going on every single minute of the day. And so that's why it can be tiring to be organized and be efficient, but it's a lot less tiring than running around like a chicken with your head cut off. So to keep those priorities in mind, you can go old school and literally have a list of your high value priority or tasks posted at your desk. And then in addition to that, before you leave work in the evenings, figure out what your top 3 tasks are for the next day. And so that way, you're working on those top 3 tasks as soon as you get to work. And if any fires land on your desk, or if great opportunities land on your desk and you need to take your time away to go do those things, when you're finished, instead of, just your mind spinning like, oh my gosh, what else is next, you can return back to that list of, oh yes, my top 3 tasks that I need to get done today, so I can still make progress on supporting those high value tasks and priorities.
Now, recently on LinkedIn, there was a little bit of a kerfuffle about to-do lists. And someone was talking about how, Richard Branson doesn't write to-do lists, and to which Richard Branson replied, oh yes, I do. So is writing down to-do lists part of what you're talking about? And if so, how do you remain uncluttered at your desk?
To-do lists can definitely be a part of it, whether you're digital and you have it on your device or laptop, or whether you're paper-oriented and have that list. But it's more than just this long list of everything you need to do. A lot of people get overwhelmed because that to-do list is never ending. And the important mindset to understand is that as long as you have a full life and as long as your career is going well, you will always have a long to-do list. So to remove that overwhelm, you actually want to have a separate to-do list just for the day. And that list contains those top 3 tasks that you need to get done, as well as any others that you have already on your calendar. Like, let's say you already had a client meeting scheduled that you need to go to. And you want to make sure that you don't have your day scheduled every single minute, because that doesn't allow any gaps for those fires and those great opportunities. So you want to make sure that you pad extra time in for everything. And on your to-do list, actually schedule those top three tasks from your to-do list into your calendar. Because so many times we've got this list that we're trying to work from, but because we don't have times attached to it, subconsciously we don't know how long that's supposed to take, and then we put too much on our list, and then we end up being depressed at the end of the day because we couldn't finish that list. Well, if you have 20 things on your list and each one of them take at least 3 hours to complete, there's no way you can finish those 20 in one day. So you need to make that short, realistic list for the day and then schedule those tasks into your calendar.
Well, that short, realistic list, I totally agree with that. But there's 2 philosophies that I constantly hear, and that is either you start off with the easiest task first and build towards the day as you get momentum, because some people are not necessarily morning people, and so they have to, like my wife, don't plan anything before 9 with her, because basically she'll stab you when you're not looking. But that's because she's not a morning person. But as soon as she gets going, she's super effective all day long. Where with me, I'm much more of a let's get all the hard stuff out of the way. So I can, because a lot of people confuse laziness with effectiveness. They think that if you're super effective and you get it all out of the way, and then they see you not doing anything, oh, he must be lazy. And it's like, well, no, I did all my work, and I try to get all my work out of the way so I can lounge.
Right.
So are you do the difficult stuff first, or do the difficult first last, the kind of build momentum kind of person? Because those are the 2 things I always hear.
Right. For me personally, I like to do the harder stuff first and just get it over with. But that's really an individual choice, because we need to operate based on our brain types, just like your wife knows she's not a morning person, so don't do stuff before 9 a.m. So that is up to each individual. And then bringing back in that communication piece, for those people who you work with regularly, they need to be aware of that, so that way they know not to schedule a meeting at 8:30 a.m. if your brain isn't functioning until 9 or 10 a.m. So that's really an individual choice. I don't believe there is a 100% absolute correct way that everybody must do things in a certain order. It depends on how you function best.
Well, you brought in one of the biggest variables in this whole situation, and especially if you work in an office, and that's coworkers. How can, besides communicating like, hey, I can't talk to you right now, or don't talk to me till 9, which those things are going to happen. Those are kind of everyday kind of situations. How can you still manage coworkers, because they seem to be the biggest time suck that you run into?
Yes, and people roll their eyes into the backs of their heads when I give them this advice, but then once they start applying it, they get it. I recommend that they have weekly team meetings with the people they regularly work with, so either within their department or whatever team that they're assigned to. And if you look at studies across America, the majority of Americans believe that meetings are a waste of time. Yes, they are, unless you run them this way that I'm going to share with you. You have to limit it. You have to limit the time, and there has to be a time segment for each part of the meeting. And so if everybody knows that this is a 30-minute team meeting, there won't be any lollygagging once you show up, but you do need to show up with what tasks you've accomplished in the next weeks, or in the last week, so yay, celebrate your wins, what projects you have coming up in the next week or 2, and what resources you need from people, and what questions you have about this project. And so that way you get all of this out in the open during that very brief meeting. Everybody has a chance to plan ahead, so you can cut back on those interruptions, because so many of those interruptions are because somebody waited to the last minute to work on their project and now they need help. So this in a way forces everybody to be a lot more organized and efficient, because they have to show up at that meeting and be held accountable for what they have coming up next.
So how do you work with the non-professional personal stuff? Because one of the things that when I was a manager, I used to try to talk to everybody. And I just every day, it was 5 minutes a person. I didn't have a huge team. So, that would the first hour of the day, I would just kind of wander around and chit-chat for a couple minutes just to see how they were. The problem was certain people I knew, if I chit-chatted with, it wouldn't be 5 minutes. It would be longer. And then they would also kind of pop their head in. If I had my door open at any time, they'd pop their head in just to talk. So how can we eliminate that without causing a lot of the interpersonal problems? Because, you still have to, they're human beings. You have to interact with them.
Right.
You can't ignore them, and you can't tell them, hey, leave me alone, I've got to work constantly, because after a while you'll get a reputation, and so you have to be part of the community. But how can you, limit their way of doing things as far as chit chat versus, hey, it's time to work?
Right. What you'd want to do with the conversation example that you gave is set the expectations in the beginning. So if it's you walking up to somebody, just say, hey, I've got 5 minutes and I wanted to talk to you really fast. How are things going? And so from the beginning, that conversation expectation has been set at 5 minutes. Or if that coworker or colleague is walking into your office and you know that this is a 60-minute colleague and not a 10-minute colleague, then you can let them know from the get-go, hey, thanks so much for stopping in. I've got 5 minutes before I need to move on to this next, appointment or task or what have you. So what can I do for you? And that way they know they only have the 5 minutes. And as far as blocking off some uninterrupted work time, in a perfect world, you'd be able to have 8 hours of uninterrupted time so you can actually get stuff done. But we all know that isn't realistic. So if you can just let folks know ahead of time, hey, for this 30 minutes, if you guys could just please give me some undisturbed time because I've absolutely got to get this done, people will be forgiving of 30 minutes of do not disturb, as opposed to an 8-hour grump who just says all day, leave me alone, I'm working.
Yeah. And exactly, you can't be that 8-hour grump, because even if you're a pleasant person when you do interact, if you're constantly telling people that you can't interact, that it comes off the wrong way. And
right.
So I knew you were coming on, and as I always try to do is I posted, hey, I've got Helene's coming on to talk about inefficiency of the workplace, and do you have any time management issues? And it seems the number one thing, and I don't have this, so to me it's completely, I don't understand how this is, but I know it's a huge problem, and it's email. I know people who have like 1,000 unopened emails. And I'm like, I have no unopened emails, because I don't play the, if it comes in, I have to do whatever that person says. It's an email. That's the great thing about email. Right. If they're sending it by email, I can put it off, because had they called me, maybe that's a different story. Now I understand the urgency. But people's inboxes apparently get so far out of control that they just feel overwhelmed. How can you manage an email box? I mean, I just delete and reply as quickly as possible, and it doesn't really affect me that much, but apparently it's a huge problem.
Yes, and the reason why you don't have that problem is because you're not just sitting there with your email inbox open all day and answering everything as it comes in. You just said that you can wait and answer them later. A lot of people don't have that feeling. They feel like, oh my goodness, it came in by email, I have to answer it within the next minute or two. And that's why they keep their notifications on and keep getting interrupted throughout the day. So if for somebody who has problems with handling email, there are two parts. There is handling the daily incoming email, so it's daily maintenance, and then you've got the decluttering part of cleaning out that inbox with 500, 1,000, 10,000 emails. My record has been, I think it was something like 11,200 emails in an email inbox when I was working with a client. So
I don't think I've had that many in my entire life.
Well, some people get them. And, part of the reason why people who struggle with email get so many emails is because they send so much. See, the less you send, then the less you get. And a lot of people won't pick up the phone to have a conversation that could take care of the problem instead of having 30 back and forths of email. Well, you just created 30 emails for yourself. And so it's taking your time writing an email so you cover all the points so there aren't all those little questions that pop up, which means not answering email right away, just like you do. And then for the decluttering part, with cleaning out that inbox, you want to start with your oldest emails and then work your way back, because chances are if you have an email in your inbox from 3 years ago, either you have already handled it or it just doesn't matter anymore, so you can delete a lot more easily. And just block off some time, like when you're sitting at an airport waiting to fly out somewhere, just sit there mindlessly on your phone, deleting, and you can clear out your inbox.
Well, it's like the closet. If I see something that I haven't worn in a couple years,
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting rid of it. Obviously, it's not that, unless it's something specific like a tuxedo that,
Right.
once every 3 years I may need a tuxedo, and hopefully, God forbid, I can still fit in it. But it's one of those. It's like, we'll keep that. But if it's a shirt or a pair of pants, and I haven't seen this in a long time, well, I can donate that to charity, just like email. You can delete it, especially after a certain amount of time.
I was just going to say, your brain is wired that way, and so you are blessed with that gift. But there are a lot of people out there who either didn't learn those habits or their brain is not wired that way, and so they really struggle with maintaining and keeping up with whatever is entering their lives. And the more that they delay making decisions about what's coming in, then the more problems that they have later on, because everything just piles up and becomes more overwhelming.
Well, I think that's where most of the frustration comes in, is that people don't do the same thing that you do. So where I'm like, oh, well, I'm not super efficient in any shape or form. I just have certain things that I do that just happen to be more efficient in certain ways. And but when somebody else has, like when they have their emails and they feel they have to do whatever email comes in the moment it comes in, I believe that's more of an expectation than an actual procedure. And
Yes.
So how do you manage the frustration that someone else is putting on you because they're inefficiency or over efficiency? Maybe they're just too efficient and it really makes you feel like you're just a schlub not working hard.
Oh no, somebody's too efficient? What is that? Well, to hire or to handle somebody who has that expectation of answering emails right away, that goes back to communication and setting expectations for your clients. So let your clients know, I'll answer your email by the end of the business day. So that way your client isn't expecting you to answer your email within 2 seconds. And that way they do understand when it takes you 4 hours to reply to an email, but you do give a very thoughtful reply, you're not being lazy and you're not being inefficient. You're just making sure that you're handling everything for your clients as well as possible, and you're giving that person quality work.
Well, before I let you go, there's one last thing I wanted to talk about, and that was some of these situational things that happen. They're kind of, it's not an everyday occurrence. Really, the thing is, I think a lot of people procrastinate, and that's where they get a lot of their inefficiency from. Is not because they're really good, and then like maybe on a Friday or near the end of the day, they start, I don't want to do this because I can do it on Monday, but it's needed. It's got to be done. They start postponing things. How can we get out of that habit of procrastinating? Because that usually ends up snowballing into things to getting out of control.
Right. One of the reasons why we procrastinate is because we don't understand what those high-value tasks are. So number one, make sure you understand what they are and they're posted. Number two, if you can figure out why it is you're procrastinating, you're going to be able to figure out the solution to it. Some people procrastinate because they don't actually understand how they need to do this project. So they're afraid of starting because what if I do it wrong? So if that's the case with you, then you want to make sure that you go ask for help on that project, find out how to do it so you can get it done. Then you've got perfectionists who are afraid to finish because it won't be perfect. And so it's dealing with the mantra of, good enough is good enough. It's better than not doing anything at all. And some folks just plain don't want to. Procrastination is the adult version of a 3-year-old's tantrum who says, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. So we need to make sure that we do it, but a lot of times that requires playing mind games. So if it's something you don't want to work on, well, what bribe can you give yourself so that you will work on it and you will get stuff done? Or for people who believe in the whole concept of the future self, where you think of how your life is going to be in the future, you can ask yourself, if I don't get this done by 5 o'clock, what is my life going to be like this weekend? Or will not doing this task serve me well? So asking yourself those kinds of questions and playing those mind games will help you get through procrastination. And something else you can do is remove your temptation apps from the home screen of your phone. Because most of us, when we want to procrastinate, the first thing we do is reach for the phone to go check social media or to check email. So if you move those apps, those tempting apps off your home screen and it takes you a little longer to get to them, you'll be more likely to catch yourself in the act and quit the procrastinating and go back to working on that task.
Well, I want to make sure you go back to work, but before you do, the book is The Inefficiency Assassin, Time Management Tactics for Working Smarter, Not Longer, available today, April 5th, so it's out at Amazon. Where can people find more about you and about the book?
They can go to the website, theinefficiencyassassin.com, and I've got resources there. They can find out where to purchase the book, and they can also connect with me on social media.
Well, I appreciate your time today, and I thought we covered a lot of stuff very effectively and very efficiently.
How appropriate, wouldn't you say?
That's the show. Thanks to Helene for coming on. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at RealityCheckPod, like the Facebook page, and send any questions, comments, or guest suggestions to Craig at SpeakerCraigPrice.com. See you next week.